Welcome back, guys. I thought it was time for a new video. I haven't been active in a while, hunkering down. Q4 craziness and Q1 wasn't really much less busy than that. So I've been really busy doing crazy schedule. I'm currently completing an after hours pen test, so I'm pretty exhausted at the moment. Nonetheless, I wanted for a while to come up with some technical content about a demo of an internal pen test. Basically, my idea was to develop an active directory domain in my local environment and run basically a random pen test showing how I would go from zero to hopefully domain administrator. And this is totally random. One thing I learned about anti-directory engagements is that they are totally random, so they're totally dependent on the client-specific configuration, which means sometimes I found situations where I was able to enumerate valid user password spray to get valid passwords, find the password through srep roast, and then run a series of additional attacks and enumerate the domain through bloodhound and plumhound. Other times instead, even because they had a much stronger password policy, I was even unable to retrieve a valid password for any Active Directory user. So it's kind of like a chocolate surprise. You never know what you're gonna find, basically, kind of like an Easter egg. But enough of that. My idea, that's what I developed the post about, is coming out of an inspiration I received from the post from this guy, Tim Connell, this guy here. He wrote and keeps writing a bunch of posts about how to be a great pen tester, and I love the contents and what he has to say. I mostly agree with his views, and I practice most of the recommendations he provides myself, but I would bet to differ in a couple of specific points. My opinion, though I appreciate the guy, this is not a criticism, but rather a contribution or an enhancement, if you like. I'm open to have a conversation about this. So, Tim, if you want to have a conversation, no worries, man. My opinion is that rather than being a great pen tester, you will need to become a better consultant. I believe this is not only a semantic difference. In my opinion, there's a clear difference between pen testers, or anyway technical testers or engineers, regardless of how you call them, and consultants. What I mean by that is that a real difference with your work can be only made when you face the client and you educate the clients on how to remediate the vulnerabilities you found and how to improve their security posture by following the strategies that you recommend them. If you're not client facing, you don't make a big difference making the world more secure. And that's what our industry should be all about, my opinion. Yes, we're hackers. We like to mess around with systems. We like to pound systems. We like to get shell we'll have to get DA on a domain and so on and so forth and all the good stuff. But that shouldn't be our ultimate purpose. Our ultimate goal should be to provide business value for our client and explain the client why they should avoid certain configurations, what happened if they don't remediate certain vulnerabilities, and especially what kind of risks they pose for their specific environment. In fact, there are vulnerabilities that, generally speaking, can be critical or very important, but not so much in a specific environment. For example, in a healthcare environment, you often have legacy applications because healthcare providers need to support applications that pretty much talk with a bunch of older systems because they don't often update or upgrade their infrastructure. That's a very big problem there. Anyway, my opinion is that a consultant is something different and better than a tester or an engineer. That's because while an engineer or a tester, how you want to call it, it's indifferent to me, isn't always client facing. For example, when I was a security engineer with Polito, I wasn't client facing. It was my boss who dealt with the client communication. So I only provided him with information when communication was needed. So I wasn't having a big impact on the client security posture. With Optiv instead, I am Optiv as far as the client is concerned, so I'm responsible for the whole project from start to finish, and especially of the whole communication process, especially for the technical aspects of all this. In other words, if something happens with a client, I don't know, for example, I can access a device for an internal pen test, I need to troubleshoot that with the client. I can delegate that to anybody else. So I need to come out with solutions and make sure the client understands what it needs to be done and why it needs to be done. Needless to say, that caused me to grow exponentially as a consultant because I went from 0 to 100 basically from week 2. I was with Optiv, so I was thrown into the fire and facing client, and the first client call wasn't very good, to be honest. So the problem with this profession is that you can learn only by making mistakes. It's a learning by doing process. So there's a way, in my opinion, you can develop to avoid repeating the same mistakes over and over again and get better at what you do. And that's the core idea of this post. The way I do it is I created a file years ago, broke in the industry and started penetration testing as a job, where I keep track of all the problematic situations and errors I ran into over the years with clients and note them down for future reference so I don't incur in the same mistakes in the future. Of course, I don't store any client specific references or information in these entries because I'm not stupid, and anyway, I wouldn't compromise my client security posture in any way, especially with this. So to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, this is my OneNote notebook where I keep track basically of lessons learned over previous pen tests, and this is something I update as I keep leading projects now for Optiv before with Polito. You see, this is a specific entry. That's something that happened to me, and I don't want to happen again. So I happened once to change the VM password on Friday, which caused me a bunch of problems because Fridays, of course, you have fewer people around, especially help desk people. So it was kind of problematic. And you want to make sure you don't run into the same mistake again. So when you run into a like situation, you can go back to the entry and remind what you did previously, kind of like, oh, that's what I did. So that saves you time and avoids you from making the same mistakes over and over again. I also keep track of solutions to specific error messages. For my mostly, this is kind of like lesson learned file. For example, let me increase the size here. It's not very readable. So this is something that's very important to me. You need to use the kickoff calls, both the internal and the external one with the client, to troubleshoot and anticipate any potential problems that might happen over the pen test, because it sometimes happened that I had situations like hold-ups on the client end. For example, it took them a while to provide the IPs for the pen test, which caused me to have delays on my testing, and this is something I want to avoid. You see, if you happen to incur in a specific situation, say 2 years ago, you might forget about it, but if you think you lived the situation before, you can refer back to this file and you can find a specific entry. You remember what you did to solve that problem. That saves you time and helps you be more efficient. And that's the whole idea behind this post. I hope you guys like it, and I hope you guys can also contribute with more ideas I haven't thought about. So thank you guys, and have a good day.